Okay, I have 4 different saws that we're going to talk about today. These are the 4 hand saws that we're going to be using in class that are available to us. We have a rip saw. It's got the bigger teeth. It's going to cut faster, but it's going to leave kind of a sloppier cut. It's meant for what we call ripping. When we say ripping, we mean cutting with the grain of the wood, the grain being these lines. So we're going to rip with the wood. Now you can technically cut either way. It doesn't really make a difference, but that's what the saw is meant for, is for ripping with the wood. That's why it's called a rip saw. We're going to use a crosscut saw, which is meant for cutting across the grain. It's got smaller teeth. Okay, it's going to cut a little slower, but it's going to be a nicer cut. We have a back saw that has this back spine here. It's got even finer teeth. Okay, so it's going to cut even slower, but it's also going to leave a very nice cut. And then we have a coping saw, which is going to, it has pretty fine teeth. It's this thin blade, so it's going to let us do curves. Okay, the other 3 saws are meant for cutting straight lines. So let's see how they work. First we'll do the rip saw. Again, this is meant for cutting with the grain. I just wanted you to see it, what happens when we cut against the grain with all 3 of these. Our first stroke is always going to be back to put a little notch in the wood. So you can see, leaves kind of a rough, it's not too bad, just a little bit of a rough cut. We'll go to the crosscut saw. Again, our first stroke is back. It's looking a little nicer. Takes a little bit longer to cut though. Go to the back saw. Again, our first stroke is back. It's a much nicer cut, but it cuts a little slower. And then finally with the coping saw, we would use this in the same way. Our first stroke is back. But now we can do curves much easier with it. You want to be very careful because the friction will heat up the blade, and if it gets pinched in there, the blade can break. So you want to go pretty fast, but you don't want to push hard. I'm not pushing hard. And I can do some kind of curve. It doesn't do really sharp curves. You want to be careful not to do really sharp curves, but we can do some curves. If you want to do really sharp curves, you'll have to make what we call relief cuts. I'll show you those in the next video. So when you're making cuts, let's say with a crosscut saw, there's a right way and a wrong way. The wrong way is to do this. When I get to the end of a cut, this is the wrong way. I'm going to keep pushing really hard and I'm not going to support my piece. So you can see what happens is we got some tear out there. Not the end of the world. I could cut that off or break it off and that piece would probably be okay. But now I ruined the whole bottom of this piece. So what I want to do when I get to the end of a cut, okay, is I'm going to slow down and I'm going to support the bottom of this by pushing up just slightly. Okay. I still got a little bit of tear out, but that's a lot better than what I got before. Sometimes you'll get no tear out. Okay, so it really depends on the type of wood and how sharp the saw is, everything like that. So we have a rip saw, again, big teeth, cuts fast, but leaves a sloppier cut. Crosscut saw, back saw, and a coping saw. Okay, these three saws would be used for making straight cuts, and then this saw would be used for doing curves, coping saw.